So one more reference tracing example. This one is obviously a bit nasty. It actually contains some of the same functions as the previous one, but used in new and even more horrifying ways. So I'm going to write my output. I've already had to sort of do some advanced work to make sure I'll be able to even fit all of this on a screen. One more thing you do not have to worry about if you're tracing on paper. So I've got my function main. Just like before, I'm going to set up my initial variables. So I've got int a, I've got int b. So a is 111, b is 116, and then c is 445. And that brings me to line number 17. So if a is greater than 100. Now, of course, it wouldn't be sporting to have a tracing question where it doesn't turn out we go in the if statement. We need those nested scopes. So a is, it turns out, bigger than 100, which means I have to build a nested scope. So I end up on line 17, starting a new scope, starting it there. So I open my if statement. There we go. And I'll just make a note to myself, this is the if statement I started on line 17. I have to be very careful what I do here to make sure I have enough space left over. So line 18. Now, we've talked a lot in the last few videos about how to trace these things, so it shouldn't surprise us. On line 18, I am indeed allowed to make a variable called a in this scope. So it is an int, and it has the value 0. And then I say c equals f of ab. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to cover up the left-hand side as usual. I am now going to, onto my diagram, add something for my function f. There it is. And f takes two parameters. Their names are going to be a and b. And they're both of type int. However, a is taken by a reference, and so I'll color that in to make sure I don't accidentally use it as its own value. B is taken by value. Okay, so back down in main, I better work out what the arguments are. So what I'm passing in, I'm in this scope here. What I'm passing in as the first argument is whatever in this scope is called a, and that would be this thing. So what f gets as its value a ends up being this. So in f, the value a is this thing, the version of a from inside the scope of the if statement. The second argument, b, is passed by value, and if I go looking for b in this scope, I find nothing, so I exit the box and I go looking for b, and I find this. And I'm passing this in by value, so I'm passing in a copy of 116. Okay, so f gets the value 116 here. I now have everything I need to start running the code for f, so I go up to line number 6, or line number 2. I better make sure I keep it together here. Line number 2, so I'm setting a to be the value 6. I'm in the scope for f, so I set a to be the value 6. Well, in the context of f, here's a. This is this thing up here, so I set this to have the value 6. I set b inside of the scope of f to have the value 10, and then I print some output. Okay, so f, and then I print out 6 and 10. And then I return a plus b. So this is actually the same function f as the previous example. So a plus b in this context will be 6 plus 10, so that's going to be 16. I make a note of that. I guess I'll put it down here where I was making the call. I shouldn't have uncovered that so soon. And then f is ready to end, so the scope for f ends. There we go. And I get back down to main. I'm now on line number 19. I'm done the right-hand side of the assignment statement, so I uncover the left-hand side, and it says c equals 16. So I'm in this scope here. I go looking for c, and of course there's nothing in this scope that's called c, so I look outside the scope, and there it is. I find this, so I set this to be equal to 16. And then I print more output. So I print outside. And I print out the value of a. So in this context, in this scope here, the value of a is 6. The value that I get for b is 116, because I have to exit the scope, and then I find b here. And the value of c that I get by the same logic is 16. Okay, and now I end up on line 21. And this is sort of a dirty trick. So, but not enough of a dirty trick that you wouldn't see it on an exam. On line 21, I ask, is a less than 100? Okay, so in the scope, the current scope is here. Is a less than 100? Well, a has the value 6, so yes. So I enter the if statement. And now I end up in another nested scope. So here's my second nested scope for this if statement. This is the one that started on line 21. Okay, so I get to line 22, and I make a new variable called b. There it is. It's an int. Its initial value is negative 1,000. And now I call my function g. Okay, so I'm going to make a box for g. G is going to have 3 variables, just like in the previous example. And its variables are going to be called a, b, and c, and they are all ints. And g accepts a and b by reference, so we'll color in those boxes there. And it accepts c by value. Okay, so we'll just put that on hold for a second while we work out the value of each argument. Okay, so on line 23, what is a? In the current scope, so here's the scope I'm in. I go looking for a. There's nothing in here, so I exit the box, and I find this as a. So the first argument that g takes by reference is going to be this thing here. So I'll just draw that in. So when I get into g, the name a is this particular variable from main. And then same thing with b. So I go looking for b. I'm in this scope here. I look for a name b, and I find this. So the second thing I pass into b by reference, into g by reference, its name is going to be b, ends up being this. So in the context of g, the name b is this thing here. And then finally, I pass in the value of c. So g takes its third parameter by value. If I go looking in the current scope, so here's the current scope, if I go looking for the value c, I don't find it here. I exit the box. I don't find it here, so I exit the box again. And then I look out here, and here's a variable called c, and its value is 16. So I'm passing in the number 16 here. And so g gets the number 16 as its value of c. So I have it all set up. I'm ready to call g, and so I do. I start running on line number 8, and just like in the previous example, we're going to follow that first law of assignment statements. So I go get the value of a. Okay, so in g, this is a, and its value is 6. So I take the value 6, I cover up the right-hand side of the assignment statement, and the left-hand side says put the value 6 in b. Okay, in the scope of g, this is b, and so I set this to be 6. And then I get down to line number 9. On line number 9, again, cover up the left-hand side. I go figure out what c is. Well, in the context of g, c is this thing, so 16. Uncover the left-hand side, assign the value 16 to a. Okay, so here's a in the scope of g. I figure out where a really is, and I assign the value 16. Okay, and then finally we get this. Okay, so I'm going to cover up the left-hand side. I now have to make a function call. I've got this nice little pocket of space on my diagram for that. That's convenient. There we go. I'm going to call the function f. F takes 2 arguments. Their names are going to be a and b. As before, f takes its first parameter by reference, so I'm going to color this in. And it takes its second parameter by value. Okay, next thing, what am I passing in? The first thing I'm passing into f, what's going to become a in the context of f, is whatever in the context of g, in the scope of g, this value b. Okay, so this is b in the scope of g. But of course, b is this thing from main. That means if I'm passing it by reference, the thing I'm passing is this thing here. Remember, the cardinal rule is just because this appears on the diagram for g doesn't mean this is something different than the thing that it refers to. This is this. These are both the same thing. So the variable that I pass in, b, which is this, is going to be passed as the first argument to f. So I'm going to draw this arrow. I'm going to take the long way here. There we go. And then the second thing I pass in the context of g is this value of a. Okay, so here is a in the context of g. Its current value is 16. And I pass that by value. So f receives it by value, int b. All right, so I'm ready to begin executing f. So I just queue this up to take the return value. Okay, I get inside of f, I say a equals 6. Okay, here I am in the scope of f. This is a, so I set it to 6. Okay, surprise, surprise, it actually already is 6. So I follow the arrow, and it turns out it already is 6, so that's easy. B equals 10, so I set my variable b to be 10, and then I print some more output. So I print f. And I print out the value of a. So the value of a is this thing, that's 6. And the value of b is 10. And then I return a plus b. Well, I mean, as usual, that's going to be the value 16. I make a note of that return value down here where I called the function f, and then f can end. And finally, our scopes can begin to clean up a little bit. So the function f ends. I've made a note of its return value for when I need it back in G. I'll just go through and erase all the stuff I created here. My drawing program really doesn't like these. Even the drawing program is out of patience for this kind of tracing example, I'm afraid. There we go. I get back to G. I uncover the left-hand side of the assignment statement, so I'm now back in this scope here. I'm assigning the value 16 to C. Amusingly, C is already equal to 16, but I'll go through the motions anyway. So here we go. C is equal to 16, and then I print out some output. So I say G, and I print out the values of A, B, and C. A, well, the value of A is that thing, so it's 16. The value of B is 6, and the value of C is 16. And finally, G ends. Okay, so G is going to end, so I'm going to erase its scope. I'd say that's good enough for the amount of patience we all probably have watching this. And that takes me back down to the end of line 23, so I'm now on line 24, and I generate more output. I say inside. And then I print out, well, let's see, in the current context, so I'm still in this scope here. In the current context, the value of A, well, let's see, there's nothing called A in here. I leave the box. And there is something called A out there. So A evaluates to 16. B, well, I'm in this scope here, so B evaluates to 6. And finally, C takes me all the way back out here. So then this ends up being the value 16. And then finally, I exit. So I reach this curly bracket on line 25. That means I close the scope that I was in. So it gets destroyed. It and everything inside it get destroyed. Now I'm back in this scope here. But then this scope ends as well. So on line 26, that scope ends. So I destroy it. Just get rid of that there. And we get that wonderful, nice final print statement where all we do is dump out the remaining values of variables. We print out A, B, and C. So we're now on line number 27. We print out A is 111, B is 116, and C is just 16. So pretty nasty, although it would look a lot better if you had more pieces of paper. If you had more space than I did, it would probably look a lot better and easier to manage. Pretty nasty, but doable as long as we keep everything organized.